No.
Yeah, you guys have a beautiful winery. So this is Casas del Bosque.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just
About
voted
what
the 100 best wineries to visit in the world.
Yes, I see why.
about what Maynard was mentioning about Casablanca, you see here it's a sort of like a cropped map of Chile, and you will find that we are pretty much very close to the coast, as Maynard was just saying. And we briefly covered this idea of the coastal influence that you get in Casablanca, these morning mists coming into the valley that really cool down the valley. When we look at there's a lot of thermal amplitude between day and night. These are the kind of things that we kind of look at when we say it's a perfect place for cool climate variety. The soils are very sandy, and as Maynard was saying, they're pretty well suited for these particular varieties. So when we talk about Casablanca, we emphasize the fact about Casablanca being such a great valley for cool climate varieties. It's because of all of this: the weather conditions, the soils. If you could sum it up in just one word, it will be terroir.
The sandy soil and the close proximity to the ocean, or 12 miles away, as you said. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what you said gives a kind of floral character to the wine. Is that correct?
Yeah, floral, perfumed.
Perfume, floral.
I don't know why, but sandy soils give you slightly lighter wines, especially if you grow red wines on sandy soils. You get a bit less tannin normally, a bit less length as well. But
see.
you get more aroma.
What's the overall seasons like?
It's much like California, actually.
Oh, so pretty temperate, kind of Mediterranean climate.
Very pleasant Mediterranean. It rains in winter. It's dry in summer. So it's easy to grow grapes. Less pressure from diseases because we always have the breezes from the ocean. So even after the rain, if you're unlucky and you have some rain in say September, October, it dries up very quickly.
To help me understand the terroir in Casablanca, if you were to plant Cabernet Sauvignon in the Casablanca region, but not in sandy soil, is it safe to assume it would probably be heavier?
It would be heavier, yes.
Okay.
It's a bit like saying Burgundy. There's these two villages, no? Volnay and Pommard. Pommard is known for heavy clay soil, and it gives denser, more structured wines. Whereas Volnay is a little higher up in the hill. It has lighter soil, very calcareous, very permeable, and it gives lighter, more floral, more perfumed wines. And that's basically the difference, even though one village is almost, well, it's very close to the next one. And it's similar here. I think lighter soils, like sandy soils or very calcareous soils, give lighter wines, but normally with more perfume. That's the whole thing about white wines normally. Whereas heavier soils, clay soils, gives you sturdier, more structured wines. Both make perfect sense, of course. In general, you'll find Chile makes slightly lighter wines, which are a bit more on aroma than on structure, say compared to Argentina or Australia, maybe. We don't get many Australian wines here in Chile, unfortunately.
So help me understand. A lot of wineries around the world, they may have 4 different Pinot Noirs or 4 different Chardonnays, or maybe 5, or maybe 3. Maybe one is $50 a bottle, maybe the other's 30, maybe the other's 20. One thing I understand that contributes to the cost of winemaking is if you thin the vine, meaning you remove some grapes, some more nutrients from the vine go to less grapes, resulting in better premium grapes. Is there anything else that contributes to, when you see a vineyard that has different wines and they're different prices and it's the same grape, can you kind of elaborate on that for the average consumer? So, because that's a question I get a lot from consumers as well. They've got 4 different Pinots, but one is $80 and one is $20.
I know that's a question Maynard will be happy to answer, because we've been asked about it a lot lately regarding what's the real difference between a Reserva and a Gran Reserva, and then you got the Pequeñas Producciones, and Maynard, why don't you go ahead with it, and I don't comment on that.
Well, basically, sometimes you see vineyards making different, or wineries making wines from different vineyards, and sometimes the grapes are basically more expensive. There's some famous vineyards in California that the owners simply charge more for the grapes, so the resulting wine will be more expensive. In our case, it's mostly our own grapes, except for Cabernet Sauvignon and Carmenère. So we have spots in the vineyard that we like a bit more than others, or that give us specific results. And then, of course, it always was important, the whole thing of aging wine in oak barrels. It's becoming a bit less fashionable now. I think the spirits industry took over from there. With the longer you age it, the more expensive it becomes, sort of thing. You see us now focusing much more on the quality of the grapes. And for instance, the Sauvignon Blanc Pequeñas Producciones comes from a very particular spot of the vineyard. It's our oldest block, as a matter of fact, and grown in very heavy black clay soil. So it gives a completely different expression of Sauvignon Blanc than the rest of what we grow. So that explains part of the price. It's scarcer for one. There's less of it. And the other thing is, yes, the yields are lower and it takes a bit longer, and it ferments in barrels, which is also a fairly costly process.
Yeah, because
So
barrels
it
are more.
basically explains differences between different lines.
So barrels, aging in barrels is more expensive than stainless steel, right?
Yeah.
And even more
It's
expensive if you're using French barrels, right?
We mostly use French barrels, although I personally like American barrels very much as well, as Guillermo can attest to, as he used to work for the Cooper that I work with very much. We're trying different styles of oak. We don't think we have all the answers yet, because the whole barrel aging thing was imported a bit from Europe. Then fortunately the Americans loosened the whole thing up a little with new styles of oak and toasting. And now here in Chile, we're trying to make sense of all of that for ourselves as well.
You said, and I never thought of this, but so one of the things that can add to the cost of the wine is if a winery or a vineyard, sorry, purchases the grapes, depending where they purchase the grapes from, that can add to the cost, because just like if you're buying shoes, well, this pair of shoes may be more expensive than this one, right? Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't think about that. That's obvious. So, as a quick
In the
recap,
US, there's even growers that charge less for the grapes, but they get part of the I think it's 10% of the value of the bottle back once it's sold. It's a way also to add prestige to your particular vineyard.
okay, so the person growing the grapes may cut a deal on the initial cost of the grapes, but they may want something back in the sales of the bottles.
Beckstoffer is a good example. It might ring a bell from Napa Valley. Andy Beckstoffer.
Gotcha.
He probably sells some of the best Cabernet grapes in all of Napa, and I think more often than not he gets an extra for the bottles being sold instead of just charging more for the grapes. So if the wine really ended up great, he gets a little more money.
Is a quick recap on what factors can influence the final cost of the wine. One could be grapes. So if you're purchasing the grapes from somewhere, where you're getting them from and the quality level of the grapes will affect the price. Two, yield. So if you have a smaller plot of land for this particular Reserva Sauvignon Blanc or Chard or whatever it is you're growing, less yield equals less wine to be sold. Less wine to be sold equals you need to charge more.
Exactly.
And then the other thing can be if you trim the vines of the grapes. So because less grapes on the vines equals more nutrients from the vine to those remaining grapes, which means you're going to get better grapes for the wine, which means you're going to have less yield, which means you have to charge more. Is there anything else on like any other main point that I'm missing?
I would like to add, Kurt, that whenever we go and try to position our wines in different price segments, it's not like, okay, we're going to produce a wine that's $12 a bottle, and then again, a wine that's going to be $20 a bottle, and we're going to try to reach those price points. Sometimes it's the other way around. We try to go for distinct different styles for maybe the same variety, and that's going to end up setting out the differences. One of the best examples I can think of is, for instance, our Chardonnay. When you look at our Reserva Chardonnay, it's very much in line with what you would expect from, I don't know, maybe a Chablis style of Chardonnay, in which is more fruit forward, much more minerality, freshness. We don't make the wine go through a lot of aging in oak barrels. Actually, not even the whole batch goes through oak barrels. Only a percentage. And that's one particular style of wine that some people enjoy very much. Other people really like the more heavily oaked style of Chardonnay that you'd find, for instance, in, I don't know, many wineries in Russian River, for instance, in California. And in order to do that, to produce a Chardonnay with those characteristics, we need to do a little more oak aging, and of course, you start using the best grapes for that particular variety. So in that aspect, sometimes it's the difference in style that set up which wine is going to cost this and cost that, because you set up to do different styles, and then the main difference between the two of them is not that one is better than the other because it's priced higher, but it's basically a cost issue.